Well, hello. If you don't know me, I'm Kyle. I'm one of the pastors here at the Crossing at our church. If this is your first time, welcome. Glad you're here. If you're coming back, glad you're back. Like Nick said, we're just pumped to be back in this space together with you this semester. I wanted to start tonight by sharing a story. I was meeting with someone recently, just a few weeks ago actually, in my office. She was just a little bit older than you all, and she said something that has just kind of stuck with me the last few weeks. I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation where you're just talking to someone, they say something that you just you can't get it out of it. It might not even be like the most mind-blowing thing ever, but it's just like this thing that you keep thinking about. Well, that's kind of what happened with me. But before I share with you what she said, I want to give you a little context. So the context is she was sharing some of her story with me. Some of growing up. She grew up in the South, in the deep South, the Bible Belt. She was a part of a small church. And when I say small, I mean really, really, really small. And this really small church was really serious about following Jesus. The problem was she wasn't. Her heart, she would say, was never really into Jesus. She went through all the motions. She said, I was a pretend Christian, but her heart was never into it. She said, you wouldn't have actually known that though from looking from the outside, because the outside of her life, everything looked great. Like I said, she was involved in a church. She'd gone ever since she was a little kid. She had a great family. She had great Christian friends. She dated a Christian guy all the way through high school and then into college. And that great Christian boyfriend that she dated, she eventually married. She said, man, my life, it just looks so good. And to be honest, it really was good until it wasn't. Until it wasn't. You see, she said 3 years after marrying that Christian guy, that marriage, it ended in a divorce. 25 years old. Caught her completely off guard, came out of nowhere. She said in the midst of the fallout, the pain that she felt, she said she didn't know what else to do, didn't know where else to go, and so she turned to other guys. She said weekend after weekend, guy after guy, hookup after hookup, just to numb herself from the pain of losing her marriage. And then she said when that didn't work, because eventually it didn't work, she said she turned to substances and quickly became an addict to multiple different things. She said there were many, many years where I woke up and I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize the person that was looking back at me. And then she said something changed. Actually, everything changed. It all started to change, she said, about a year ago. And I said, what happened a year ago? She said, someone invited me here to the Crossing. She said, that was the point. I don't know why I came. My life was maybe at a low spot. I don't know what brought me here, but that friend invited me and I came and everything changed. Everything about my life changed. She said it was the first time in my life. I'd grown up in church. I'd been around Jesus. I'd done the Jesus thing. I'd gone through all the motions. I'd done all the right things, but this was the first time, she said, that I really started to follow Jesus. And I was curious, I asked her about that. I said, okay, so first time in your life, she's late 20s now. First time in your life, you're actually following, you've been around Jesus your whole life. This is the first time you're following. Tell me about that. What's the last year been like? And this is the thing that she said. It's not gonna blow your mind, but this is the thing she said to me that I just keep thinking about. She says, the path has been so unexpected, but my life is totally different. And then she said, you know what? The strange thing is I wouldn't have it any other way. See, that's the thing that stuck with me because I think that's it. I think that's so true, right? That the path that Jesus invites all of us onto, it's often not the path that we expected, right? It's not the path that we kind of thought. If you've been following Jesus any amount of time, you know what she's saying is true. The path that Jesus invites us onto, it's often so unexpected. Bumps and twists and turns, ups and downs, left and right. It's not the smooth paved road that we thought it would be, but man, when we get on that path, everything about our life starts to change. It doesn't change overnight, but some of it changes overnight, but a lot of it just changes over time as we're on the path. You see, it's interesting. I think a lot of times we reduce being a Christian to just believing in Jesus. What does it mean to be a Christian? Well, I believe in Jesus. But the thing about that is Jesus, he doesn't stop at calling people to believe in him. He doesn't stop at calling people to simply have faith in him. No, what does Jesus say? Repeatedly. Sometimes to individuals, sometimes to families, sometimes to brothers, and sometimes to friends, and sometimes to crowds. Jesus repeatedly says, what? Follow me. He doesn't say believe in me. He doesn't say have faith in me. He says, no, follow me. He says, join me on the journey. Do as I do as you come on this path with me. And the thing about it is, it's not easy. It's not easy. Actually, Jesus himself, he says this in Luke chapter 9. He's talking to the crowds of people. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Following Jesus, it's not gonna be easy all the time. Actually, maybe a lot of the times, if we're really following Jesus, it's gonna cost us something. At the very least, it's gonna cost us our comfort, yeah? I've been doing this a long time. People love to ask me, hey, what's hard about college ministry? What's hard about college ministry in particular? And you know, over the years, one of my answers that I kind of keep coming back to is it's hard trying to convince people to follow Jesus beyond the times that it's comfortable. It's hard trying to convince people, and this is honestly, this isn't true of just college students, but I think it's particularly true in these college years that sometimes it's hard to try to convince people to follow Jesus beyond the times that it's comfortable, beyond the times that it's convenient. But that's why we're here, right? Like if you've been around me or if you heard me talk or really any of our staff, if you heard it, we don't want to go through the motions here on Tuesday nights. We don't want to go through the motions throughout the week. We don't want to go through the motions on Sunday morning. We don't want to go through the motions in the Christian life. We don't want to be pretend Christians, right? One of the things that I say a lot is say, look, I'm not interested in you just following Jesus in college. Of course I want that. I want you to follow Jesus in these years. I think these are some of the more formative years of your lives. I want you to faithfully follow Jesus. But here's the thing, I want you to follow Jesus the rest of your life. Not just right now. But I think that in order for that to be true, then we have to talk about what it actually means to follow Jesus. We have to get real about what it actually means to following Jesus. And spoiler alert, I think it's different than a lot of us often expect. And so just grant that for a second. And if that's true, then I think the question becomes obvious. Okay, Kyle, what then does it actually mean to follow Jesus? And I guess what I would say to that is we don't have to guess. We don't have to make assumptions, right? Jesus himself, he tells us in what is probably one of the more well-known passages of all of the Bible, certainly one of the most quoted passages in all of Scripture for all of history. Jesus gives a sermon. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And in this sermon, Jesus gives not a checklist. Sometimes people reduce the Sermon on the Mount to this like list of moralistic teachings. And I think as we go through it this semester, you'll start to realize why that happens. But that's not what Jesus is actually doing. He's not giving us a checklist. He's not giving us a moral to-do list. No, he's giving us a picture. It's a big picture of the kind of life that he's inviting us into. So just a little context, this sermon, it's found in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. So if you're unfamiliar with the Gospels, what are the Gospels? There's 4 Gospels in the New Testament. Just think of them as biographies of Jesus, right? It's a biography written from 4 different people of the life and the teachings, the ministry, etc. of Jesus. And in particular, the Sermon on the Mount that we're gonna look at comes from Matthew chapter 5 through Matthew chapter 7. It's the core of all that we're gonna talk about this semester. And I'll be real with you, Jesus is gonna be real with us. If you've ever read through the Sermon on the Mount, you know that Jesus says some pretty intense things. If you haven't read through it, buckle up, because he's gonna talk about things like anger. And he's gonna get in our face a little bit about lust, and he's gonna talk to us about the need to forgive, and he's gonna talk about money, and he's gonna talk about anxiety, and he's gonna talk about loving our enemies and what that looks like. And he's gonna talk to us about things that are just as hard for us today as they were back then. But here's my hope. As I've been thinking about this series and this passage in particular and this semester, my hope is that over time we're going to see that as hard as they can be at times, as challenging and kind of in our face as Jesus' words are, that we'll start to realize more and more over time that it's the path, that his words, the word of God, is the path to the life that we're looking for. Whether you know it or not, whether you came here tonight looking for a path, I'm telling you what I hope is true over the course of this semester, that we realize more and more that Jesus' words here in the Sermon on the Mount become the path to the life that I think we're looking for, but I think we're looking for it because we were created for it. Okay? So we're gonna pick up, this is Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. Matthew writes, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and he sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them." Okay, so there's nothing crazy in that, but kind of cool. I actually had a chance to go here. So back in 2017, not the exact place, we don't really know exactly where Jesus sat down on a mountainside, right? But we know the general area. So here's a photo. This is northern Israel. So this is the, this is the Sea of Galilee, so the Galilee region. And it might be kind of hard to tell from this photo, but essentially what's happening is that everything kind of slopes down toward the Sea of Galilee. And what that does is it creates kind of this, natural amphitheater, if you will. So, how does Jesus project his voice? There's no microphones, right? Jesus has to project. And so, as the thing slopes toward the Sea of Galilee, Jesus and all the crowds, all the people come and his voice projects out, right? And before we get into what he said, I want us to remember really quickly who's telling the story, who's recording these things. I said this is the Gospel of Matthew. That means a guy named Matthew is writing all of this down. Now, maybe you're unfamiliar with Matthew, so who's Matthew? Well, Matthew is a former tax collector, and in the first century, tax collectors were bad dudes, right? They were outsiders. They were collaborators with Rome, and they were people who often would have been left behind, kicked out, written off, that kind of thing. But the interesting thing is now that kind of person, think about this, a tax collector, someone who's been written off, someone who is an outsider, this collaborator with Rome is writing down Jesus' words that describe who belongs in the kingdom and what life inside the kingdom looks like. I don't think that's an accident. I don't think it's an accident that kind of person would be recording what Jesus is about to say. This is what he says, picking up verse 3. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." I know you probably noticed because I highlighted it, but also you can hear the repetition. Jesus says the same thing over and over and over and over, right? 9 times in 12 verses, Jesus says the same thing. He says blessed. Blessed are. Now the thing about blessed is, right, it's one of these churchy words that we use inside the church and also it gets used outside the church, but what does it actually mean? Like when Jesus says blessed are you, ... what is Jesus actually getting at? Well, one of the ways that we could translate the word that's behind the word bless is we could say happy. But the thing about that is it doesn't quite get at it, because what Jesus is talking about, it's more than this kind of, we think about happiness as like this kind of fleeting emotion. It comes and it goes, right? Jesus is getting at something different than that. Maybe we could say fortunate, but still that doesn't quite get it either, because Jesus, he's talking about something deeper. He's talking about something lasting. He's talking about something that's being done to us. God wants to bless us, right? It's not something we achieve. It's something that we receive. See, God wants us to flourish. He wants us to experience deep joy, deep peace, deep satisfaction. He wants us to get what we might call the good life. So when God talks about blessing, and when Jesus talks about blessing, he's saying, look, this is the path to the good life, but there's a problem. There's a problem. And that problem is that our definition of the good life often differs from Jesus's. And when that happens, when we get the definition wrong, when we're talking about a different thing, using the same word but talking about a different thing, right? We end up chasing after going down the wrong path, yeah? That's the tension. It's this tension between what we think will make us happy, what we think will satisfy us, and what Jesus is about to say actually does that Jesus is trying to confront. It's that tension, what we think will make us happy with what he says will actually make us happy. I was thinking about that, and it reminded me of a super weird story from out of New York City. As I think about it, I was actually sitting back there. I was like, there's no way this story is true. So I'm about to tell you a story that I read as true, but it has to be false. But we're gonna go with it, okay? Super weird. So here it goes. Apparently, there are like millions of cats and dogs that live in New York City, right? I don't know how many people live in New York City, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, whatever it is. Someone else knows that. But tens of millions of dogs and cats, pets, living in New York City. And that's not shocking, right? A lot of people. But have you ever thought about what happens when those pets die? It's not like you can just take it to Central Park and bury it in the ground, right? Like concrete jungle. So what do you do when a pet dies in New York City? Well, the city came up with a solution. Hey, pay us a ton of money and we'll dispose of your pet. Well, a citizen of New York City thought there has to be a better way, or a way that I can do it for cheaper. And so that's exactly what she does. She comes up with a plan. She says, I'm going to do this thing cheaper. So she puts out an ad, says, hey, if your pet died, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 but let me take care of it for you. So people call her. Come get my pet. My pet's died. She goes and collects the pet, takes the money. Then she goes to a Goodwill and she buys a suitcase. And she puts the pet in the suitcase. I told you it was weird, but it's gonna get weirder. Because then she takes the suitcase and she goes to the subway. Now, why do you take a dead pet in a suitcase that you bought at Goodwill to the subway? Well, she's lived in New York City a long time, and what happens a lot on the subway? Thieves. So she takes the suitcase with the dead pet, sets the suitcase on the floor, pretends like, oh, I lost track of where the suitcase is, and eventually looks, and hey, what do you know? A thief came by and stole the suitcase. Problem solved, pet gone. Super weird, told you. I told you. Here's the thing, imagine this is a true story, and you're the thief, and you get to wherever you go with this suitcase that you decided to steal, and you open it up, did you find a dead pet? What is going through your mind, right? Now, I said it, I'll say it again, super weird, but here's the thing. I'm telling you this story, as weird as it is, I think there's actually some overlap in our life. I think, stick with me, I promise. I think that there's actually some overlap in our life, because I think that sometimes we do a version of that. Sometimes we chase something that we're convinced will make us happy. Sometimes that's a bad thing, right? I'm stealing a suitcase. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's a thing that I think I need. Sometimes it's just something that I think I want, something that I think will bring me the good life. But what happens is that sometimes, and you guys have lived long enough, you know that what I'm saying is true, that sometimes you get that thing, whatever that thing is, And you open it up and it's not what you expected, right? It's not what you had hoped for. It's not what you wanted. It's not the life that you thought it was going to deliver you. I mean, think about it. Get past the weird story and just think with me for a second. Like, have you ever done that? Like, are you connecting with that at all? Like, have you ever chased something that you thought would make you happy? And then you got it and you realize, man, this isn't it. This isn't what I hoped for. This isn't what was promised me. This isn't what I thought I was getting when I got this thing. Maybe some of you came here tonight and you're like, man, that's kind of me right now. I'm looking for something. Maybe you don't even know what it is. You're just chasing. New thing, new day. Just looking for something to make me happy. You see, what Jesus is trying to tell us is that if that thing is anything other than him, you're chasing the wrong thing. You're chasing the wrong thing. And he's saying to us that if we want the life that he calls blessed, if we want the good life, then it's going to come by going down a path that most of us wouldn't normally choose. It's going to come from going down a path that maybe all of us wouldn't naturally choose. And here's the thing about the path. I kind of tipped this off earlier. The path, it changes us. The thing about going down the path, the reason Jesus is calling us to go down the path is because it changes us. It transforms us. Everything about our life, like she said, it starts to become different. How so? Well, let's work back through what Jesus says. So 5:3. Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I want you to notice, notice where the path begins. It doesn't begin with strength. It begins with surrender. Right? To be poor in spirit, what does that mean? For a long time, I didn't have a clue what that meant, but I've come to realize what it means is to be poor in spirit. It's to see our need before God clearly. It's to stop pretending that we're self-sufficient. It's to stop pretending like we've got it all together and instead just open ourselves up to depend on our need for Jesus. See, if you want the kingdom, you've got to see your need for the king. If we want the kingdom and the things that come with Jesus' kingdom, then we've got to admit our need for the king. Now, if you think about that, we live in a culture that rewards confidence. It rewards achievement. It tells us to be about ourselves and to self-brand. And so what Jesus is saying here, it's not about strength. It's about surrender. It's about seeing our need. That's deeply, deeply countercultural. Let's go on, 5:4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. You know, Jesus, it's kind of weird. Jesus says, like, happy are those who are not happy. Happy are those who are not. Blessed are those who mourn. Mourn what? Well, in context, Jesus is talking about their sin, right? Jesus is saying, blessed are, happy are, fortunate are, good life is found when we, what? When we mourn our sin. See, mourning is what happens when we stop defending our disobedience. Mourning is what happens when we stop defending our sin and instead we see it for what it is. It's disobedience, it's rebellion against God, and that grieves us. And here's the thing, what Jesus is calling us to, he's saying, look, when we see our brokenness for what it is and bring it into the light, we don't experience shame. No, we receive grace. We receive grace. That's why it comforts us. See, some of us are here tonight and we're hiding right now. You're hiding. You came here tonight, and I get it, you're in a sea of people, but you're hiding because you know what you did. You feel shame. You wouldn't say it out loud and you hope nobody can notice, but you're feeling shame right now because of the choice that you made last weekend, or because the thing you did last night, or because the thing that you did in your mind today, or because the thing that you want to do this upcoming weekend, right? Jesus is saying, look, bring that into the light. Bring that into the light, because when you bring that sin, when we bring our disobedience, when we own our disobedience, and when we mourn it, when we see it for what it is and bring it into the light, we bring it to Jesus. We bring it to Jesus' people. We receive comfort. Not approval, not it's no big deal, but grace, because we've received grace too, yeah? Let's keep going. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. See, meekness, sometimes we tend to think that meekness is weakness. That's not what Jesus is saying. Meekness is not weakness, it's strength that no longer has to prove itself. So think about it like that. It's not weakness, it's actually, it's that we no longer have to prove ourselves. It's a kind of strength that says, look, I don't have to posture. I don't have to pretend. Why? Because you're secure in Jesus. How much of our time, think about that for a second. I was thinking about this afternoon, my own life. How much of your life, that's meta, let's go day. How much of your day, physically or digitally, do you spend pretending that you're someone you're not? I'm not saying like catfishing. I'm just saying like you're pretending to be someone you aren't. Why? Because you're terrified that if people really saw you, they wouldn't like what they see. We're afraid of what people might think if they really knew us. See, meekness, it says, no, I don't have to prove myself because my security is in Jesus. Matthew 5:6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Man, we could talk an entire sermon on this one, because what? College, man, these years, it's a lot of things, but it is certainly a time in life where we are constantly faced with intense desire, yeah? For a lot of things, success, relationships, approval. And I'm not saying any of those things are inherently bad or inherently wrong, but what Jesus is trying to get us to see is that what we want most, what we desire most, what we crave most, it's him. What we really desire is Jesus. And he's saying, look, as we follow him, as we go down that path and become more and more like him, our desires, they start to change. We stop chasing what we think will make us happy, and instead we start to focus on him. We stop chasing what we think we want and recognize that what I really want is a life shaped and transformed and changed and sent out by Jesus. That's the life. It's not the life that sells, but it's the life that you really want. Verse 7, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. See, mercy flows outward when grace has gone deep. In other words, we show mercy because we've been shown mercy. Yeah? Like we show mercy because mercy is what we've been shown. We've received mercy in the form of Jesus. We sang about it just a few minutes ago. We sang about the mercy that we've received that we didn't deserve. And so this path, it shapes us into people who are merciful. Verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Purity of heart, it's not perfection, but it is prioritizing God first. See, when Jesus becomes our deepest desire, when our allegiance is for Jesus, and what happens is that we're less and less divided. We're less and less pulled in a million different places. You know what that's like, don't you? You know what it's like to just have desires going every which direction, to be pulled in a million. It's exhausting, isn't it? This is not perfection. It's to say, no, my priority is God. I'm going to let God shape what I want. I'm going to let God shape my desires. I'm going to let God shape how I live. Verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Peacemaking, man, it's not avoiding conflict. I know that we hate conflict. Anyone hate conflict? Yeah, me too. It's not avoiding conflict. Jesus is not saying peacemaking is conflict avoiders. No, he's saying it's moving toward people with the same forgiveness, the same patience, the same compassion that Jesus moved toward us with. I mean, think about it. Nick read Romans 5:8 earlier. Jesus came to us while we were still enemies. Jesus is calling us to be peacemakers. He's not saying, look, don't avoid it. Don't pretend like it's no, it is a big deal, but in the midst of that conflict, move toward it the same way that I move toward you. It's a hard one, but it's what he calls us to. Let's go to the last set. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you. Man, this is hard. If this is true of you, you know this is really hard. Blessed are you though when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil against you. Why? Because of me. He says to those people, to us, rejoice and be glad because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. How do you know you're with Jesus? Here's a good litmus test. How do you know you're with Jesus? You want him even when it costs you something. Even when it costs you something. Because when the kingdom is your reward, you aren't afraid of what faithfulness is going to cost you. It will cost you something to follow Jesus. If you faithfully follow Jesus, it will, I said this earlier, at the least it will cost you your comfort. It will at times be inconvenient, and sometimes it will be much more than that. But Jesus is saying it's worth it. All of this, Jesus says, as hard as it is, as challenging as it is, as unexpected as it is, it's worth it. And this is the path. Again, this is the path. Maybe it's the path that we didn't expect, but it's the path that we're looking for to get the life that we really want. This passage, every time I come across it, it reminds me of a clip from The Chosen. Anybody watch The Chosen? Some of you maybe. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, The Chosen, it's kind of a fictional retelling of Jesus' life, a fictional retelling of the gospel. And some episodes are better than others. But this particular clip, I think it's pretty good. It's kind of this creative, curious scene where it wants us to imagine a moment where Jesus and Matthew are talking about how Jesus is going to start the Sermon on the Mount. And he says, look, it's not a to-do list, it's a map. And so as we're gonna watch this clip, it's 3-ish minutes. As we watch this clip, here's what I want us to think. I don't want you to ask yourself, am I doing these things? Here's the question I want you to ask. I want you to ask yourself, is this the person that I'm becoming? Okay, so it's not, am I doing these things? Can I do these things better? Should I just try harder? No. It's, is this the person that I'm becoming? Okay, let's watch.
Matthew. Bye-bye. I've got it.
The opening?
Yes,
What is it?
a map.
The what?
Directions where people should look to find me.
Okay, give me a moment. I'm ready. Rabbi?
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven.
Yes. But how is it a map?
If someone wants to find me, those are the groups they should look for.
Flip. See, these verses, it's not a to-do list. Jesus says, it's a fictional retelling, right? So this isn't the Bible verse, but it's a map. If you want to find Jesus, these are the people to look for. And so I think that's what I'm kind of driving us toward. That's the question that I think this passage, one of many, but at least the passage or the question that I want you thinking about right now. It's the question that I think this passage begs. It's what kind of person am I becoming? Think about that for this semester even. Like, what kind of person? I don't know what your break was like. I don't know what last semester was like. I don't know what last week was like. But I think that's a good question for all of us as we start a new semester, we start a new year, to just thoughtfully reflect on what kind of person am I becoming? Who do I want to be? Another way we could maybe ask the question, if someone were looking for Jesus today, think about it like this. If someone were looking for Jesus today, would they find him where they find you? If someone were looking for Jesus today, I'm going to say it one more time, would they find him where they find you? See, guys, my hope, my prayer is that more people would know and believe and see and love and follow Jesus, because where they see us, they see him. That Jesus is in our midst. So I'm just gonna pray that would be true. Jesus, we thank you that we have a place to come and learn about you and worship you. And we're just honest right now in this moment that sometimes the answer to that question is no. They wouldn't. The thing about you is that you know that's true about us, and you don't say, ew, get away. You draw near. And so I pray for all of us here, wherever we are in our journey with you, wherever we are as it relates to you, that you would make yourself known to us. And I pray that your spirit would fill us and it would move us and that it would bring us onto this path that you've called us to. It's the unexpected path that leads to complete change, total transformation. Oh God, may it be so. Help us to walk in your way. It's in your name we pray. Amen.